Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us again at the main stage at the Startup Festival 2022. We are here in Villa Bigi, and we are joined by Christoph Solish. Christoph, welcome to Malta.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Enjoying Malta. A lot warmer, a lot nicer than Berlin at this time of the year, so I'm not complaining.
Good. What do you think of our festival?
I think it's awesome. I mean, I looked at this and I was confused or I was scared that you would be looking at the backdrop more than me, but then I realized I'm really good looking, so you probably still focus on me, so it's going to be fine.
Even better when we see the title like that, Pitch Like a Boss. What are you going to tell us?
I'm going to talk about a skill that I think is really important for startups, and that's being done a lot here today. And I'm not talking about who can eat the most chocolate muffins, I'm talking about pitching. Because that, I think, is the skill that's most being used today, because you're all talking about startups. Every startup founder is constantly pitching, and I want to give you a couple of hints on how to do that well.
Thank you so much. So I leave it in your hands. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Yes, because I want to talk about a skill that I've committed not my life to, but the last 10 years of my life, because I'm better known as the pitch doctor. So yes, my name is Christoph, you don't have to remember that. You have to remember I'm the pitch doctor, and maybe you remember I'm the guy that always wears brightly colored Adidas jackets. And if I'm in Malta, this is the colors I go for, but I have like 45 other color schemes, and if you ever meet me and I'm not wearing one of these, it's not me, okay? If you want to understand how long I've been doing pitch coaching for, I refer you to my logo. You can tell the difference between my logo and me. My logo has hair. I don't have hair, so that means I've been doing it for a long time. And I have small children, and they cost me all my hair, but that's a different story. So 10 years of being a pitch coach. I'm based in Berlin, as I said, but I work for a lot of accelerator programs, incubators, corporate venture labs, these kinds of things, around Europe, certainly, and beyond that. And I've actually coached a couple of the teams that you will see later here on stage for Plug and Play Malta. A simple rule of thumb, if you like their pitches, it's all because of me. If you don't like their pitches, it was their fault, okay? That's, I think, what we can agree on. Now, because I want to tell you how to pitch like a boss, I brought 5 of my favorite TV bosses, and I'll give you a couple of tips on how to do it. Obviously, you probably know this TV boss, and the first tip I have for you is you have to realize how humans react to pitches. How does it work when you do a pitch and the other side takes that in, and what happens with them? Because the thing is, if I ask you what is the most important organ when it comes to pitching, you would probably say it's the brain. Because most people believe that pitching is about having this information in your brain and getting it into the other person's brain, and then the other person's brain says, yes, this is a great idea, I want to invest in that startup. Unfortunately, that's not how it works at all, okay? The brain is secondary when it comes to pitching. The most important organ when it comes to startup pitching is not the brain, it is the heart. Pitching at its core is about emotions, okay? It's about getting people emotionally interested about what you're doing. Because let's talk about these people, okay? Investors, important people. You're always pitching to important people, right? If you're pitching to the intern is super happy that somebody's talking to them. But if you're pitching to an investor, if you're pitching to the CEO of a company, they are busy, and they are being bombarded by pitches. Everybody wants something from them, okay? They don't get up in the morning thinking, hopefully today will be the day that finally somebody asks me for money or pitches me an idea. That's not how their life works. Their life works, I get up and they know they'll be bombarded by pitches all day long. So what happens, they live in a world of noise. And what happens when you live in a world of noise? You try to block out the noise. If you're a startup investor, you see 1,000 pitches a year, at least. And you can't take all of them to heart. You can't go like, oh, this is the most important thing in the world to every single one of these startups. So what they do is they build this little wall around them, and they're like, yeah, there's 1,000 startups out there, but I'm in here, and I don't care. That's the point. When you go up on this stage, and you start pitching, all of the people that are sitting there, they don't care about your startup. They didn't get up today in the morning thinking this is the greatest thing. Your startup is your baby, but it's not their baby. They don't care until you make them care. And that's the important point. That's what your pitch has to do. Your pitch has to achieve one thing first and foremost, and that is that you make people care. Your pitch is not the place where you try to fit as much information into it. If you have a 5-minute pitch, you're not trying to fit everything in there, because that doesn't work, because then people don't care. They're like, yeah, whatever, it's one of these startups, I'll wait for the next one. You have to spend your pitch making people care, and if you achieve that, then you're winning. And if you achieve that, they will ask for the details later, because that's what you're pitching for. You're pitching for the, oh, I care about this. I'll go up to the founder. I'll ask them about all the details. So don't optimize for details in your pitch. Optimize for people start caring about it, because then we can exchange the details afterwards over chocolate muffins or whatever. Now, how do you do that? How do you get them to care? Ideally, you amaze them. If they say wow during your pitch, that means your pitch is awesome. If they think just a tiny wow in the back of their head, that's already amazing, okay? You also want to inspire them. You want to show them the future. You want to get them to the point where they have an emotional reaction to, I want to be part of this startup. This startup is creating something that's great. And yes, you also want to entertain people, because if your pitch is boring, they'll fall asleep, they'll look at their phones, they're not going to pay attention. And entertaining can mean you want to make them laugh a little, but it can also mean you want to make them cry a little, because both of these are emotions, right? And they're both entertaining. We go and see sad movies because we like it, because it's entertaining to us. So whatever you do, you want to get this emotional reaction. And there was an investor that did a talk at a conference once where I went, and he summarized this perfectly. And he said, of course I'm looking for specific markets, I'm looking for specific numbers, I'm looking for specific teams, but if the first pitch doesn't get my pulse to go up, I'm not going to be interested. And that is what you have to do with your pitch. That's the goal of your pitch. Make their pulse go up, make them start caring about what you do, and then the rest will follow. And unfortunately, a lot of startups that I see focus on, oh no, I need to put more bullet points in here, I need to say all of these things, all of this information needs to get across. No. That's not what your 5-minute pitch is for. That's what an hour and a half, a meeting with an investor is for. But if you have the first pitch in front of investors, you need to make them care. You need to get their pulse to go up. That's the most important thing I'll say today, okay? So if you only remember that, I'm already happy. But let's move on to boss lesson number 2. Answer the 5 big questions. What are the 5 big questions that need to be answered in a pitch? The first one is why, okay? Everybody needs to understand why the hell the world needs the startup that you're doing. And they need to know why you want to do it as well, okay? So this is the first thing. If you don't tell people why the world needs this, you're never going to be successful with your pitch. That's why it's so important to start with the problem you're solving, make people really feel that problem, and then tell them more about it afterwards. But you start here, okay? The second question is, why you? Because especially investors will always tell you that they've seen the idea 3 weeks ago, somebody else is doing this in whatever, Sicily, right? So it's true. They're not lying. Somebody else is probably doing the same idea. So an investor doesn't just have to pick an idea, they also have to pick the team that they believe will do the idea successfully. And that's where you have to explain to them, why are you the perfect people to do this? Now, this is not in a vacuum. This is not, we're the greatest team because we have the most experience working at Google, Apple, Facebook, whatever, and McKinsey. This is about specifically for this idea, why are you the perfect people to do it? Why do you have a unique insight? Why do you have a unique understanding? Why do you care more about this problem than anybody else? Then there's the question of why now? Because that's another favorite for investors. They'll say, yeah, but the same idea was pitched to me 5 years ago. Might be true as well, but it doesn't matter. Because just because something failed 5 years ago doesn't mean it's going to fail today. You have to explain in your pitch, why is now the right time to do this? What is changing or what has recently changed in technology, in human behavior, in legal sort of frameworks, that now is the time that this can work? Often it's technology, obviously, that's why we have so many tech startups, but it can be something else. It can be a pandemic happening, right? Because that's where now we need something, and now something is possible that wasn't possible before. So those are why you, why now. Then there's the fourth question, that's slightly different, and I call it, what is the economic engine of your company? How do you create value out of little? Because if I raise $15 billion to create a $15 billion startup, nobody's going to be very impressed. At some point, you have to show where the leverage is, where you turn little input, the funding you get from investors, into a lot. And they have to understand that. Now, if you do software, or specifically software as a service, this is not really an issue in your pitch, because everybody knows how software scales. But if you do anything else but software, you have to really explain how can you do this? How can you create a product that people spend $1,000 for and you only spend 85 bucks on it? How can you do that? People have to understand. So that's sort of the engine that drives your business forward, and that includes your business model, but it's not just your business model. It's the black box behind your company that turns very little into a lot. And then there's a fifth question, and the fifth question is completely different. Because the first four have one thing in common. The first four are what you say. You can decide what you're going to tell people, and they can't really, they don't know, right? You could make it up. And that's why the fifth question is so essential. Do you have any proof for the things that you say? And this is, I think, where winning happens in a pitch. If you can prove the things you say, if you can prove that what you're building is really needed, ideally, you can say, we have 1 million customers, they all pay a ton of money for this, they all recommend our application to all their friends. That's the best case scenario. But even if you don't have that, even if you've just started and you've just done 3 customer interviews, you can already talk about that as proof why you're on the right track. You need more proof the longer you've been doing it and the more money you've been spending, but even if you start small, any type of proof will help. So those are the 5 questions. Why you, why now, what's the economic engine, and do you have any proof? And with that, we get to our third lesson, and that is search for the holy grail of pitching. Because pitches are always short. They're either short because you had 3 or 5 minutes at an event, or they're short because people have short attention spans. You're not going to get somebody excited about your startup after 85 minutes of a meeting. The last 5 minutes of a meeting is not where the magic is happening. You have to do it quickly. So now you have a challenge. You have a limited amount of time, and startups are pretty complex because you're very smart and you've figured all of this stuff out and you've done all this work and you have all of this information and you need to get that across. That is the challenge. And there is a solution to the challenge, and that's the holy grail of pitching, and that is precision. To say exactly what you need to say and nothing else. And if you can say something in 15 words instead of 30, you have to do it because it makes a difference for a 3 or 5 minute pitch. Now, in a pitch, every word literally counts. I think there's an old saying that in comedy and poetry, every word counts. I would add pitching to that. You have to limit how much time you need for the things, because then you can be clearer, you can slow down a little bit, that also helps. You don't want to talk super fast. So that's a really important aspect. Language is a really important aspect of pitching, and it means that pitching is not really about creating, it's about cutting down. It's a lot easier to build a 15-minute pitch than a 3-minute pitch. It's a lot faster. We get to the 15-minute pitch quickly, and then to condense it, to make it that precise that it fits into 3 minutes or 5 minutes, that's actually where all the work goes. And you also have to limit how many key messages you have for people. If you're trying to fit too much in, and I remember one of the startups that's pitching later, they had this problem. They had too many really cool messages and really cool statements, but nobody can remember all of those. So I think a 5-minute pitch probably comes down to 5 sentences that you want people to remember about what you told them, because they're not going to remember much more. Repitchability. Big topic for me, because I realize more and more that you might be pitching somewhere where the perfect person is not in the room, but somebody who knows the perfect person is in the room. So make it really easy for people to repeat your pitch to somebody else. Because 1, if they can repeat it to somebody else, they have understood it. 2, if they can repeat it to somebody else, they have remembered it. And 3, they can actually tell somebody else. Investors do this, they come back and they say, hey, I saw this pitch and it might be interesting for you, do you want to check it out? But if they can't repeat what you said in your pitch, they can't tell anyone about it. And they're not going to film your pitch, they're not going to take it with them, so you have to be so precise that they can easily do that. It's basically the game of telephone, right? Do you know that children's game where you whisper into somebody's ear and they pass it on to the next and the next and the next? Your pitch has to be so clear that people get it and they can repeat it really easily. I also recommend using very simple language in a pitch, especially if you're pitching in something that's not your native language. Make it easy for yourself and easy for the people listening to you. I call it Lego language, short sentences, block, block, block. A pitch is not the place to make your English teacher proud, okay? It's not about Shakespearean sentences and fancy words, it's about very simple language. Speak to people like they're 8 years old. Even if it's a room full of super smart investors, you don't want to tax them with having to figure out a bad pitch. You want to give it to them so clear that they said, yes, my 8-year-old son could have understood this, I like it, now let's talk about it more and go deeper. And then, this is sort of my summary of this part. Simplify, clarify, shortify. Always make it as easy as possible, as clear as possible, and as short as possible. If you have a 45-minute meeting with somebody, don't pitch to them for 45 minutes. Make a 5-minute pitch and then use the rest of the meeting to discuss with them and find out what they think about it and get their advice and move on to the next things. Just because you have time, you don't have to fill it with your pitch. And to be honest, precision is where all the work goes. That's just how it is. 15-minute pitch, easy. 3-minute pitch, way, 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 way harder. So you spend more time on it. You have to practice more. You have to cut it down. You have to get to that language precision. Now, boss lesson number 4, probably my favorite TV boss ever. You're not Brad Pitt, okay? What does that mean? There's this misunderstanding that pitching is about acting. People always ask me, how do I have to act on stage so people think I'm a great entrepreneur? That's never going to work unless you're actually the next Brad Pitt, Angelina Jolie, whatever, and you're not. Let's be honest. If you're that talented of an actor, become an actor. Don't waste your time doing a startup. If you're a normal person, you can't act. It's not going to work. The only thing that's going to work is being yourself and being comfortable being yourself. That's what you have to work on. It's not working on acting, it's working on being comfortable on a stage in front of people so you can be yourself and do that really well. Black turtlenecks? No, you're not trying to be the next Steve Jobs, okay? Chill out, be yourself, find your own style. My style is I use silly images with dogs and bow ties, but that's not your style, so you don't have to do that. You have to figure out what works for you, and the best way is to look at a lot of pitches. So today is a great opportunity. Look at the pitches, see what you like, and then you can take inspiration from that. Also, be emotional. Okay? I said in the beginning, you want to trigger emotions in your audience. You're not going to trigger emotions in them if they feel like you don't care about what you're talking about. So you really have to show them that what you're doing is the most important thing for you, and you really love it. I know this is really hard for Germans, because we're ice cold, we don't have emotions, and if we have them, we don't show them. Can you? Yes, he lives in Germany, so he knows. So you have to sort of get over that. For some people, it's easier. For Germans, it's really, really hard. But you have to try it. Because when you are emotional about it, other people will have emotions about it too, and they'll care about it more as well. And yes, even fun is allowed. And even this is true in Germany. I know we don't do fun normally, but in a pitch, you can have some fun. It has to fit. If you do an app for people whose parents just died, maybe the pitch shouldn't be super funny, but you're allowed to have some fun. And definitely bring some energy. And this doesn't mean you have to drink 6 Red Bulls, but bring some energy. Show that you really care, you really want to do this, you really want to walk through all of the brick walls that you have to walk through as a startup founder. That's something you can do in your pitch, and that people will see it, and they'll believe you that you'll do it in your everyday work as well. And with that, my final boss lesson. It ain't PowerPoint's fault if your pitch sucks, okay? We use PowerPoint for most of our pitches, or Keynote, or Pitch, or whatever the tool is. It's not about the tool, but we use these slides, okay? And slides are a problem, because we feel like PowerPoint is the source of all evil in the world, right? Coronavirus, Middle East crisis, Ukraine war, it's all PowerPoint's fault. It's not, obviously, right? We have to use it correctly. And to use it correctly, we have to understand one thing, that there's 2 completely different animals, like this very cute penguin and this even cuter wombat, between a public presentation and an emailed slide deck. Those things are 2 completely different things. This is meant to be a PowerPoint. This is meant to be a Word document. Unfortunately, Microsoft Word in 2022 is such a pile of garbage that nobody uses it. Have you tried to put a picture into a Word document? It's 2022. It still doesn't work. So we use PowerPoint to create something that people are supposed to read. We turn it into a PDF, we send them an email, we say, hey, read my deck, figure it out. This has to be self-explanatory. This doesn't have to be self-explanatory at all, because I'm standing next to my slide. If you could read everything I say on my slide, why am I here? And this means these 2 always have to be 2 different versions of your presentation, and yes, it sucks. It's twice the work, but life as an entrepreneur is not easy. You have to do that. Unfortunately, most people don't do it, because what is it that I see most? Do I see clearly a presentation for presenting and clearly a presentation for reading? No, I see frickin' hybrids all the time, okay? People make presentations where they're like, yeah, it's a hybrid. That just means that it's too much text for when you're next to it, and it's still not fully self-explanatory when you send it to somebody. So it just sucks for both use cases. I'm all for hybrids on roads. I'm against hybrids in pitching. Make clear versions for one thing or the other. And that's literally just putting in the effort that you have to do, because otherwise, what happens is you're standing next to a slide like this, And what happens is you're all reading the frickin' slide. Nobody's paying attention to me anymore. I could tell you my PIN number right now, my credit card information. Nobody's paying attention because you're all reading. And interestingly, this effect is bigger the more educated your audience is. Because educated people are educated and are brainwashed into reading text. They're conditioned to read text. If you have a smart person and you hold text in front of their face in a language that they can read, they will always read it. They can't avoid it. It works better if I take this slide and I go to a bad part of Berlin with a bunch of teenagers that are high on all sorts of things, and I tell them I want to present something to them. They would look me right in the face because they hate reading. But if you're in a room full of smart people with PhDs and whatever, they're always going to read. So don't give them that distraction. Have them focus on what you say, and don't give them something on the slide where they can go like, oh, bullet point 4 looks cool, bullet point 5 looks cool, while you're still talking about bullet point number 1. And while we're at it, don't do bullet points. They suck. Use pretty pictures instead, okay? Now, I said have your own style. If your style is a few words on a black slide, that's fine. But just know that pictures work, okay? Pretty pictures have 2 distinct advantages. One, they trigger emotions. Right now, you're looking at this slide, and you're thinking, why am I not on a great island like that? Why am I here? Well, that works in other places, but here we're also on a great island, so forget about that one. Anyway, you might think, why am I in this, it's not even a room, under this roof, and not in a beach bar getting drunk? That's what you might think right now. Okay, so fixed it. Anyway, the picture gives you an emotional reaction, and that's what we're after. So pictures help. And the second thing is, people remember pictures better than text. Most people, I think like 90% of people. So if you show a picture, or if I show a picture here, you'll remember this in 3 hours, and 1, you will want to go to a beach bar, and 2, you'll remember that I told you to use pretty pictures in your presentations. So pictures are basically a little hack in pitches because they can quickly do something that you would otherwise have to do the long way and the hard way. So I'm not saying you have to use pictures, but if you don't use pictures, you have to be even more emotional, and you have to be even more memorable without the picture as your help. And also, can we do 1 thought per slide? That would be really awesome. Because if you're standing next to it, as I said, why is there a second and a third and a fourth bullet point? It's always just a distraction. As much as possible, I would do this. And the cool thing is, slides are actually free. You don't pay PowerPoint per slide. You can use as many slides as you want. It's completely free. And with that, I want to close my argument here today with a quote I found on the internet by Albert Einstein, who was apparently really into pitching and PowerPoint and stuff, because he said presentations don't get longer when you add more slides. If you talk for 5 minutes and you show 10 slides, or if you talk for exactly the same 5 minutes and you show 30 slides, did your presentation get longer? The answer, Albert says no, and he's right. It doesn't get longer just because you don't show multiple things on one slide. Never save slides. Always have less information so it's not too intense for the audience, but don't put things on a slide where you're like, oh yeah, they'll read that. They won't. They don't even have time. You go through the things you say, and how are they going to read other things at the same time? It just doesn't work. And with that, my 5 boss moves, my 5 boss tips for pitching, I hope you take something away from it. I know you're all practicing pitching today, so maybe you can immediately do it in your next pitch. And if you can't, then just have a couple more chocolate muffins. Thank you. Any questions? Should I take questions? Does somebody have questions? Questions? Yeah.
Sorry, I'll use a microphone. I liked everything you said, apart from the attack on bullet points.
Okay.
What's the alternative? What do you beef with bullet points?
So basically, it's the last thing I said. Put 1 thought on a slide. Because the only reason, and there is a reason to have bullet points, the only reason to have bullet points is if you do like 4 things and you want the overview of the 4 to be on the slide in the end, when you say, now look at this again, and you see the 4 things, and that's the 4 reasons. But in that case, have the bullet points show up one after the other, so you don't distract people, and think about, do you actually need the summary? Do you need the moment where all 4 of them are on there? But because most of the time you don't. Most of the time you say the 4 things, people get it, and you can move on.
Yeah, we're cool. Building an argument.
If you're from a family of bullet points, I'm sorry I insulted your family, but other than that, I'm not a big fan of bullet points because you don't really need them most of the time, almost all of the time. Very good question. Do we have another great question like that? Yes. You have to wait for the microphone, my friend.
Yeah, what about financial data? You know, sometimes you want to, show some facts and
Yeah.
figures and...
Same thing. Pick something and make it big on a slide. Talk about 2, 3 numbers. Don't put 1,500 numbers on one slide and think that people can take it in a short amount of time. I'm totally, this is something I should say. Backup slides, big fan. Have as many backup slides as you want, and also have them be a lot more detailed and a lot more complicated. Because if you ask me for financials, tell me more about your financials, I bring up a backup slide. I have the green light from you to now talk about this for whatever, 3 minutes, 4 minutes. If it's in a meeting, we can talk about it for an hour. So that's totally fine. But the moment I just give you a 5-minute overview, I can't have 1,500 numbers on a slide. I need to pick the 3, and I have to say, this is our customer acquisition cost, this is our lifetime value, and this is how many users we lose every year, churn rate, whatever. Those 3 on a slide, absolutely. But what most people do is they take a screenshot from some tracking tool, they throw everything on a slide, and people sit there, and you can sometimes see how they feel like they're hit in the head. If you have to show like a graphic or something that's more complicated for some reason, make sure you point people to where exactly they're supposed to look. Now, you can do that with a laser pointer, if it works. I don't like the laser pointer too much. I prefer just having the stuff show up. Like if you have a nice graphic that shows some sort of circle diagram of how your product works or whatever, start with the thing you talk about first, then click and have the next thing show up, because that way immediately I know, oh, now he's there. If you show a complicated picture from the start, I'm like, what is he talking about? Where is he? Now I'm confused. Try not to confuse your audience. They get slide anxiety. That's what I call it. It's a whole new thing, slide anxiety, because bad PowerPoint slides makes people anxious. Pick the right numbers, put them on a slide, and focus on the important stuff. Don't give people more than they need to get. Any other questions? Excellent question, by the way. I love the questions here. Super smart people in the room. Anybody? So you have a question. No, you're just waving? You're just coughing. Okay. Is it coronavirus? Let's hope it's not. Anybody else? There is no coronavirus on the island, right? I see that correctly. In Germany, everybody has coronavirus, but here, nobody? It's cool. I like it. Any other questions? No? Okay, so thank you very much. Enjoy the day. Always be pitching, and good luck for your startups, for your pitches, for your life in general. Thank you. Now you can look there. Now you don't have to focus on this anymore.